Hello, my name is David Wells. All the time, actually. And I'm delighted to be invited by the Diocese of San Bernardino to be part of your Faith Formation Day. It's a real joy and a privilege to be invited. A big shout out to Dr. Samuel Torres, who of course invited me, and we've been working on these videos together. I hope you enjoy it. 3 short 15-minute pieces for your Faith Day. And I'm speaking to you, as you probably gathered from my accent, not from your part of the world, but in fact from overseas. I'm speaking to you from the south coast of England, and that's why I'm situated in front of a map. I'm speaking to you from my kitchen. I'd much rather be speaking to you in San Bernardino. I can't even say it right. I'd like to be over there with you. I hope you enjoy this. In part 1, I want to give a consideration, if you don't mind, to what this is all about. Okay, let me just tell you about teachers over here. They're lovely people, right? But we gather for Faith Formation Days, and we sit in halls and they bring someone like me to maybe give a keynote address. But what's often happening at the beginning is that they're sitting there. Now, I know you wouldn't do this in the Diocese of San Bernardino, but over here, right, what they often do is they sit there and they're thinking, Faith Formation Day? Really? Do they not know how busy we are talking about faith formation? If they'd just let me get my list done, that would be a bigger help. In fact, it's kind of crazy, but there's a perspective that says, what happens to the people we love? What happens to the children in our classes if we stop learning? And yet we can turn up to events like this and feel too busy, too pressured. So what's the opposite of what we stand for in Catholic education? Well, you might say it's secularism or atheism. You might say it's people who have different beliefs. You might say the opposite is Islam or Hinduism, but it's none of those things. Pope Francis reminds us that the opposite to everything we stand for in Catholic education is not people who are different to us. It's not other ideas. The opposite to Catholic education is what he calls in Evangelii Gaudium, his encyclical, he calls it small-mindedness. It's us shrinking. It's us shrinking behind the list of things we have to do. Now, I know that probably everybody watching this video is busy and under pressure, so I do thank you for giving us this time. But I also know that if we're not careful, the first thing we sacrifice on the pyre we call busyness is our own formation, our own education, our own edification. We just become stuck in the way things are. We call it over here a rut, to be stuck in a rut. Same old, same old, same old. Not because we're tired, but simply because we're busy. And that causes a certain shrinkage. I met a lady at the end of a presentation one day. She came up to me and she said, I've been listening to your talk. And I said, thank you very much. And she said, no. She said, my husband. And I said, oh yes. She said, my husband's retiring this summer. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. And she looked at me. I'd said the wrong thing, right? She looked at me and she said, it is not wonderful. And I said, well, how can it not be wonderful? You know, your husband's about to lose the pressure of work. And she said to me this interesting line. She said to me, what am I supposed to do with him? They'd lived together for 30 years, but she didn't know who he was without his job. His world had shrunk behind the list of things he has to do, until one day the list becomes your reason for getting out of bed. The Catholic Church built schools with a very profound and very rich why, but it can get lost behind the how. And we're very good at how. It's important to improve. It's important to be effective. It's important to meet expectations, but they are our how. They're not our why. You won't find a gravestone anywhere in the world upon which are carved the words, "She met all her targets." We were meant for more than that. So here's the thing. Blaise Pascal writes all those years ago, by means of a diversion, a man can avoid his own company 24 hours a day. It's possible to devote our very lives to being busy until we can't bear the thought of having nothing to do. That's what we're like over here, and we're good people. This doesn't make us bad people, but Dr. Gemma Simmons, in her book, Dancing at the Still Point, she said we can go for days, weeks, years, putting one foot in front of the other, without really taking store of the patterns of desolation and consolation in our lives. It's as if we can almost sleepwalk. The enemy isn't people who are different to us. The enemy is us, shrinking behind a cult of what Pope Francis says is success. Making success the point of your life will in the end probably turn you into a cynic. It's a good thing to be successful, but it's a how, it's not a why. You were not born, according to the Catholic Church, to be successful. You were born to love. And so our whole Catholic education system is built on a different foundation. You're probably aware of Artemis. Artemis is the Greek goddess of the hunt. Beware of worshipping at her statue. Artemis measures only that which counts. Be careful of giving your life only to the things you can measure. Data, salary, impact. These things are all good in their own ways, right? But I've got to tell you something, folks. They're not a great reason to get out of bed. And in the end, you'll recognise that. Artemis is a warning. Beware of only that which is measurable counts. So what is all this about? If we're not about the cult of success, if life isn't a competition, and if we weren't born to get out of our beds simply, if you like, to finish our list, then what is this all about? I want to take you to John chapter 10, verse 10. It's a passage in John's Gospel that you probably know well. It's a very famous sentence. It appears in all sorts of contexts. You get it in school mission statements. It's often used in youth work. Because in John chapter 10, verse 10, Jesus says, "I have come that you may have life and have it to the full." And you go, "Oh, I like that. I do like that. You know, carpe diem, seize the day, grab every moment of life." We all like that sentiment. But a lot of people pay no attention to the sentence that comes before that one. In John chapter 10, verse 9, Jesus says something quite different. Just before that sentence, he says, "The thief comes only to kill and steal and destroy." You go, what? What is that about? The thief comes only to kill and steal and destroy. I have come that you may have life and have it in abundance. Why do those two sentences matter? They matter for this reason. The thief isn't coming to steal your jewellery. The thief isn't coming to steal your car. What is the thief after in the biblical metaphor? In the scriptures, the thief is coming after your virtue. The thief is coming to steal your patience, your joy, your sense of humour, your enthusiasm, your zest for life. The thief comes only to kill and steal and destroy. Jesus says, "I have come that you may have life and have it to the full." In Pope Francis's first encyclical, that's a document he writes for the church, he reminds us, he uses this phrase a lot. He says, don't be robbed of your enthusiasm. Don't be robbed of your joy. Don't be robbed of your hope. Don't be robbed of each other. Don't be robbed of the gospel. Don't be robbed of fraternal, brotherly and sisterly love. Don't be loved of your very vigour. You came into your job for good reasons and you were right. But the risk in life is the why falls behind the how and we lose our virtue until one day we start falling out with each other over stuff that doesn't matter. And then we grow tired and weary and cynical. We're not bad people, but we are vulnerable to losing our why. So the foundation upon which your school is built and your community belongs has a very profound and rich why. And the threat to it isn't people who are different. It isn't people who don't share our beliefs. It isn't people who have no beliefs at all. The threat to it is us losing our virtue until we can't dialogue, we can't enjoy company, and we become what Pope Paul VI said is dejected, discouraged, impatient, or anxious. You see, we're not bad people, we're just not living life to the full. And when that happens, it can begin to be infectious. You know, if I spend too long with cynical people, I start to sound like them. The author Ronald Rolheiser wrote that a cynic is somebody who's given up but hasn't shut up. Have you ever found yourself doing that? You know, you moan about the world, we moan about the world that we live in, we can moan about the sunshine blazing through the window. We can do so much to become discouraged that we start to discourage each other. And then we find we're in groups. Tom Smales calls them holy huddles of the like-minded, where we simply find people who already agree with us, and then we have conversations in the car park about how terrible everything is. It doesn't make us bad people, it just means we lose our joy. I've seen it in people, they're not bad, they're just unhappy. We didn't build Catholic schools to do that to people. Pope Francis says, don't be robbed of your capacity to love greatly. We were born for love, and our Catholic schools are an expression of that very love for society. We'll talk a little bit more about that in part 2, but I want to take you to a particular sentence in Evangelii Gaudium, Pope Francis's first encyclical. And in it, Pope Francis writes this. He says, one of the more serious temptations. So you go, this is about a serious temptation. What is it? Which stifles our boldness and our zeal, says Pope Francis, is defeatism. And it turns us into disillusioned pessimists and sourpusses. Now, I was at an international conference quite soon after that document was published. And I said to the other people there from different parts of the world, do you mind telling me, please, what is a sourpuss in your translation? So we went round the room exploring different people's books to say, in your translation, how is the word sourpuss used? Because in England, that's somebody who's a bit grim and miserable. And we went round the room and they were all fairly predictable descriptions until we got to the Spanish. And I loved this. Because in the Spanish, the translation from sourpuss is vinegar face. One of the more serious temptations, right, Pope Francis, is becoming vinegar to the world. Vinegar is a good thing on my peas. But as a way of life, to become vinegar face is to lose our joy, our enthusiasm for life, the belief that what we're doing matters. I want you to know that the Catholic education system was built on a rich and profound why. And that why is something we'll explore in the other 2 videos. Before we move on to that, here's a couple of questions. Just have a bit of fun with these. Don't take them too seriously. Question number 1. When do you catch yourself becoming a bit small-minded? You know, When you start falling out over things that don't really matter. When you're lying in bed and you think, why did I say that? Why am I like that? When do you catch yourself becoming a bit small-minded? And question number 2 is, which of our virtues during the last 18 months of this terrible pandemic, which of our virtues has been under threat? In what ways have we started to lose our virtues? Just have a little bit of a think about those 2 questions. In the Catholic tradition, they're called penitential questions. They're sort of helping us to examine our conscience a little bit. None of this makes you bad, it just makes you human. And I just want you to have a little bit of a reflection, just very briefly, on when do we catch ourselves thinking small instead of big? And secondly, which of our virtues have we struggled to hold on to during the last 18 months? I want to thank you for listening to this video, and I'll be back soon for video 2. Bye.